Hello, and welcome to another episode of the First Time Founders podcast, the show where we talk about how to start a business from nothing and grow it into something meaningful. I'm Rob Lydiard. I co founded a software business called Yapster, which was acquired in 2022. I'm now a professional implementer of the Entrepreneurial Operating System, or EOS, which means that I work with entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial leadership teams to help them get more of what they want from their businesses. That's my day job, but in my spare time, my passion is talking to entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial people about their first time founder experiences, what they learned on the journey, and what we can pay forward in terms of experience to give to new entrepreneurs embarking on their first entrepreneurial endeavors to hopefully try and save them more pain along the way. Today, I'm speaking to Michael Tingsager. Michael's the host of the Hospitality Mavericks podcast, a lifelong hospitality person, founder of a number of really interesting hospitality businesses, most recently a business called Pulse Kitchen. Michael's got a wealth of experience about how to build a great business, particularly in and around hospitality and hospitality supply chain, both from experiences he's earned himself, but also from doing more than 280 interviews with world-class hospitality operators through his podcast. I'm sure you're going to learn a ton from this conversation. So without further ado, my conversation with Michael Tingsager. Michael, welcome to the First Time Founders podcast. Thank you for doing this, my friend.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me, Rob. I'm very honored, and I was, as I said to you, I'm a bit puzzled about what we're going to be talking about, but I'm sure you have a great plan in mind.
Well, you inspired me with your podcast, of course, the Hospitality Mavericks podcast. I suspect we've got quite a few contacts in common, at least from our respective time in the hospitality industry. But you're a humble guy, and you're very disciplined about resisting, I think, too much of your story on Hospitality Mavericks, because you very, very much make it about the guest. But of course, I know from our conversations offline that you have a terrifically interesting background of your own, which includes also founding businesses in a few different areas. And so, of course, with this being the First Time Founders podcast,
Yeah.
I feel like you have an unusual vantage point in that you know a bit about hospitality, you know a bit about management in big companies. We can talk about the McDonald's experience, you know a bit about B2B, you know quite a lot about B2C. So I just feel like this could be a tour de force of cock-ups and experience and learnings that we can share with newbies coming into the entrepreneurial world. So Michael, before we dive in, would you mind just a kind of quick 2-minute tour of your
Yeah.
very, very crazy CV so we can then dive into the latest adventures?
So the quick one, and thank you for all the kind words, Rob. The quick one is that I'm born and raised in a Danish hospitality family run by my mom. And she grew that to 6 different sites. It was not like set out to be a chain or anything, and it never became. It was a mom and pop group, and she did quite well. And she got some health problems and needed to, reduce some of the pressure there and sold some of the business off. And it meant that I had a job, of course, because working in mom and dad's restaurant happens very early on. So I was 3 months old when I was in the restaurant, and my mom was probably cleaning or doing something. So I was running this little, we called a direct translation from Danish to English, is like a sausage trailer. It doesn't sound very charming, but they sell these hot dogs. If you've been to Copenhagen, anyone, you will see these around. So I was running that in the weekend and learning P&L by my dad. And, you need to sell so much to let it trickle down to the bottom. The sausage cost this. And but then my mom came and said, we sold this, we're selling this, and you need to go and have a job somewhere else. Of course, you can't not have a job, because they're grafters and you always work. My mom dad and said, no, I don't want to go and have another job. But my mom said there's nothing else to do. She's quite black and white. And then he said, but you don't want us to worry about it. I found your job. You're going to be working at McDonald's. Like Paul, their friend, was open at McDonald's. I said McDonald's. I think I've been to the once in Paris. So you have to go back to the 90s here. There's a bit of gray here. So McDonald's is rolling out in Denmark. So this is
Right.
the 6th or 7th restaurant. I can't remember exactly. But yeah, of course, I do what mom tells me. And I think my mom at that point was hoping, like, I was around 15. She was hoping McDonald's going to tire him out for hospitality and he's going to leave hospitality. But it did the opposite, because I went starting cleaning the loos for a long time and opening the lobby. And I worked my, over the time up to become running shifts, to running restaurants, to go to headquarters, doing different roles within people, technology, training, operation, and also had a stint here in the UK as well. And then I spent a long time in a chain in the more entrepreneurial world, from the more corporate food going into the entrepreneurial environment, and a coffee chain that did organic food and so on. And it was not my business, but I was in there as a partner. It was very much building that business from 4 units to 27, and I'm very much focusing on talking about how do we actually build the culture, and that's really my thing. And it became my thing very early on. I got a professor from a professor of mine at university who gave me this book that's called Good to Great in my hand. And coming back to the podcast I run today, that's also because of that book. And that book is all about why is that some people outcompete others. And again, it comes into some specific behaviors and principles, but the first one is great leadership and the ability to build great culture. So
Classic.
that became my theme. And then I went out as a consultant as well in food and hospitality and did that. And out of that, actually, the podcast was born because actually a friend of mine called Ali said to me, "Oh, I would love to be a fly on the wall when you meet these CEOs and have conversations." And it was more like sales conversations in principle to get a gig, which you had many of before you got one. Um, and then he said, "Could you write blogs about that?" And I don't mind writing, but it's very time consuming and it's
For
not
sure.
my super skill. And then my mentor I have, and I still have, Chris, a brilliant guy, said to me, "Michael, you just do what," and I think it was 2017, said, "Just do what Tim Ferriss does." And I didn't know who, excuse me, in podcasting world, but I didn't know who Tim Ferriss was before he mentioned him. And then I, of course, Google 4 Hour Work Week, and started listening. I thought, that's brilliant. Interview people. And I thought it's just going to be 10 episodes, and then the lead machine will take care of that. And I've helped Ali as well. And those 10 turned in now to 288 episodes of Sit Here Today. And, one every week now. Had great guests as Jeremy King recently, Chip Conley from the States, Ari Weinswag, Nisha Katona, Tom Barton, Burger, the list go on and on. Tom Elliott from Pizza Pilgrims. There's a long list of great hospitality leaders there. And now that has also become a pursuit of when it all comes together. My purpose is in principle to build businesses as a force for good, businesses that deliver profit, impact on people, community, and planet. And that's what I do in everything I do. And then it's difficult to do 2 minutes. You said I'm also involved in a couple of businesses beside these things. And that's led to me. I met another Danish guy in London in 2015. And first we launched a catering business for office catering. We had customers like Airbnb, sitting in hotel. It's going really well. And then there came this word we don't want to talk about anymore, the pandemic, and wiped the revenue off
Yeah,
from
I
within a
remember that
couple of
well.
hours. And we had to change the way we were thinking about things. So first we thought it was just 3 months and then we'll be back on track. And then we learned, after we have fed the frontline workers and been part of all that actually looks like very dire. We're not going to come back as we did. And then we created a new product, and for people that is viewing on video, they can see. So we created the Pulse Kitchen, which is principal a meal solution. You can either buy as a consumer, direct to consumer, in some retail settings, and you take that home and you add your pasta and your sauce. And now we're also starting selling this into food service, which is very interesting. Back to the roots, helping operators, getting delicious plant-based natural food on the table, but also saves lots of labor and waste and complexity and so on. So that's the quick journey of what I've been through, and then there's been some other touch points as well, but that's like the major milestones, Rob.
No, thank you. And I actually I've tried the product. I loved it. I know you wouldn't go into this if I wasn't provoking you, but I do want to because I think it would be helpful for folks. Like I thought the product was delicious. What was it about it that inspired you to do it and makes it unique and different for the customers, whether they're consumer or business? Because and look, and don't cringe because I'm not. I know it feels like a sales pitch, but it is important because we're going to talk about the substance behind the business. I
Yeah,
think it's going to mean a lot more to people when they kind of understand the
the
what and the
philosophy.
why before we get into the how. Yeah.
So the product, as people can see, and that's the last product placement we're going to do, is called Pole. The company is called Pole's Kitchen, and it's a lentil bolognese. And pulses, I'm not trying to educate people, is lentil, beans, and peas. And the reason why we landed on that was actually what our mission was originally with our catering company, was to make more climate friendly, tasty food, because we knew there was lots of vegetarian option out there, but they're not very tasty, and there was not an uptake on it in, especially not in catering at that time. So also we had to do something that would reduce complexity in our operation. So we knew that we need to create some basis around how we build our menus. So these sauces, which we batch cooked every week, became the basis. You can make an Italian menu, you can make a Mexican menu, you can make a Thai menu, you can make a Japanese menu around these sauces. But there's always pulses in, because they replaces the protein. So pulses is very high in protein. Often, dried pulses has the same amount of protein as minced meat or any kind of meat.
Right.
So we didn't say per se that we were going to replace meat, but we said we're going to reduce meat in the office context. And we found out if you make pulses super tasty, you actually start seeing people dropping off the meat wagon, which was the interesting thing. And then with people saying, these officers were saying, can we get this home at night? And that was the touch point in the pandemic. But actually, how we think food and the philosophy around is exactly that we believe that food should be joy without restriction, and it of course should be natural. So when I say without restriction, is that we're not saying any kind of isms that you have to be vegan or vegetarian. We actually just saying that you have to enjoy your food, and we just made sure that it's a very tasty product. Then you can add your meat if you want to, and it's all built on. There's a huge study done by Harvard University around the menus of change and how we actually should eat if we should do the best for our health and the planet. And it actually eating more of four key food groups, which is grains, pulses, lots of veg, and then nuts and seeds. If we get that on our plate all the time, we're in a good place. Then you can add meat, and you do that in a lot of culture, more for taste and flavor, not as
Right.
the main thing. So actually, the meat comes last, not first, as it often does in Western cooking as it is today. And that was actually the philosophy we build around these products. And then that's the philosophy we go out and work with in food service, or also to the consumer. Actually, we've actually done the hard bit. We've done the batch cooking. And batch cooking is a pain both at home and in kitchen, and
Mm.
in the commercial kitchen. And in commercial kitchen, it's actually super risky and very inconsistent. Um, and that's actually the whole idea comes from that we were eating like that, and we saw the impact on ourselves. We translated that into a catering company that was doing quite well. We couldn't do anything about the pandemic, and now we're trying to translate that into a product, and also the support we give, especially in food service, to bring that to life, because we believe that if we can eat like this, we can change the world by the way we eat, which is our purpose of the business.
I love it. And you know what makes me laugh is I've obviously gone from being in a product business to now running a sort of teaching and advisory business 50% of
Yeah,
my time. And of course, you've gone from having other businesses, but also an advisory business, like relatively low overhead, like intellectually complex, but operationally simple.
yeah,
And you've decided to go into a product business. You've gone directly the other way.
yeah,
And I have to say, mate, it sounds awesome, but I don't envy you because it is complicated, isn't it? So for the
yeah.
uninitiated, would you just start with the very hardest thing about the new business and like work towards simple? Like with this is a place to talk about, like, not to feel sorry for ourselves, but to
No,
talk
no, no.
honestly about the hardship of
Yeah, because
entrepreneurship.
also that's where we learn. There's no one that learns from hearing successes. That's BS in my world. So, but I think the really key thing is that there's many things that's complex in any business, and if you knew what you would be facing, you wouldn't be doing. So it's good to be naive, and even though you have this beautiful plan, as we said before we started recording, you only have a plan till you punch in the face, and that plan's gone out of the window. I think the toughest bit up to now has been really, first of all, we were producing ourselves first, which
Mm-hmm.
there was issues around scalability, food service, safety kind of rules. You need to be SALSA, BSC accredited. That's quite difficult if you don't have a smaller professional setup or a factory. So we had to go out and find a manufacturing partner really to go national with this. Yeah, there's lots of factories, but finding the right factory and people who want to work with you, doesn't matter how great your story is, how good you are selling it, it takes time. And it took us, we thought it would take us 6 months, it took us 18 months.
Because
And
is there a chicken and egg problem in that, like, the best manufacturing partners want scale for obvious reasons, but you don't get to scale until you've got a manufacturing partner?
there's some, though, some places we ended there, and then also that they can't deliver the product, or we had a place where they changed the recipe to worse ingredients. And of course, we are all
No
about
way.
naturally and high ingredients. So there's again some ethics as well. And you need to learn these things and, you know, complex contracts. It's a new world. And as you said, you've gone from selling products to service. I went both, from service to product, but also to selling and being a supplier, and suddenly you have complexity in the supply chain. I thought I knew what the supply chain in food looked like, but again, there's so many things I didn't understand and still learning in a steep way, because it's a very different and a very complex. People is in food would know it's not just that there's a factory that sent the product on, and then there's the margins as well. Like, how do you then get your margins? You find your partner. How do you then you get your cost price, and then how do you then build your margins, and how can you sell the product at the price you need to sell it at? That's the
Did,
next hurdle, I would say. But
how many corporate customers are tempted to kind of produce their own product? I mean, one of the things we're seeing in the software world now is, with cloud computing and engineers being, I mean, there's still not enough engineers being educated, but there are more. It's a more fashionable thing to do now. It's
yeah,
actually easier for corporates to hire their own engineers sometimes. They
yeah,
only actually give up those products when they realize the cost of supporting those products
yeah,
without spreading it across more customers than their own requirements. But it is still something that puts sometimes downward price pressure on an early stage product company in software. Do
yeah.
you find the same thing in your world, where you present this great idea and then they're like tempted to go and try and find a manufacturer themselves? Like, how do you protect the margin in the middle when you haven't yet
Yeah,
established the brand?
of course, is a risk we put up, but we haven't seen it really yet, because I think, if it was just a product, if you just look at the product, everybody can copy a product. So it's really about
Right.
where we are focusing on and have been focusing with, it's creating a different, our brand identity has also changed 3 times since we launched, because there's also, we've done lots of tests with consumers and also in the food service, really understanding, how do we bring all these things that's inside the founders, because that always is the founder story. How do you scale that, and how how does that come alive in the logo? How do actually all these things we believe in come to life, and how do we bring this life, and not just getting the design done, but how do you start communicating about it? I think we're first ready now, a bit more than 2 years in, really to go aggressively out talking about that journey and why it actually, it's very funny you asked that question about why is it that you have this philosophy around food and so on. And it's just taking time to write that down and get, mold into the business. So I think there's an element of that. And that's the only way you can win if you don't want to be copied.
Yeah.
That's on the story, I believe. And, of course, the quality of your product has to be consistent. It's just baseline, but everybody, I believe, can copy the product. I'm
Ye-
not I'm no I'm not naive about that, and that's also why it's not about the way you produce your product. It's about, of course, protecting your IP, but actually, what change are you doing in the world, and what is your social mission besides that? I think that's where they can't compete with you, even big corporates, because they can't be authentic about that. Not because they are there's anything wrong, but that's not their role. Their role is to scale things and bring them out to more people.
Yeah, I mean, that was my argument always with corporates that were minded to write their own software. Whilst there might be a handful that did, you'd often say to them, look, like, by the time you've covered the maintenance burden of this, and you're very welcome to try, like, you didn't want to be arrogant, you let them go for it if that's what they really want to do. But, like, the loss of focus on their core offer of what actually makes them competitive in the market just
Yeah,
wasn't worth it. Plus the central overhead they then have to apply to producing something made sense. I was just curious because I always think it's really interesting in a product world, because I think it's something that founders don't often think about when they go negotiate with big corporates, because they're often dealing with semi-entrepreneurial people client side
yeah,
that are like intellectual tourists occasionally. They'll talk to founders because it's interesting, but they don't really have any appetite to do anything, and so they can really
But
waste your time.
they also have much more time in the world than you have,
Yes.
and their timelines and the way they're risk averse. And I think, early on the journey, as we were pitching in the bit, we also forgot that as entrepreneurs, like, okay, we have to help them take risk out of that. And and it's very, even if you know your customer really well. I know lots of my customer really well because I've been there. Things change. Pandemic has changed decision making process, especially in food service as well. And I think you have to be really, really assessing all the time. You need to de-risk your sales funnel much more than I thought. That was another learning. So it means, when I say de-risk, it means that you're not living off 20% of your customer has 80% of your revenue. It's a very fragile world. You will probably see companies, and have seen companies, disappearing off the radar, going into administration right now. And as a young company, you really need to de-risk that right now. But I don't have the answer, but I can see that's one of the challenges we are facing. So we are trying to do a healthy spread of that. But again, that's complicate the sales. It's not like we're just doing big corporate contracts. No, we need to. And that was also something I didn't really thought about. And then you need to have a direct to consumer channel. And then if retail comes and want you to come and pitch, you go and pitch, and then you have to do that. So it's this, and it's something I actually thought we could choose a route to market and say, this is our route to market. We do only food service, which is a primary channel. But I can see also you can't let the other opportunity pass in the environment you're in right now as an entrepreneur. You need to, okay, there's a sale is a sale. It's cash flow. So I think it's really interesting next 6 months to figure out what is the most effective place to sell in principle.
Totally. And you mentioned Jim Collins earlier. Of course, you got that famous sort of Jim Collins flywheel. He talked about I don't know which book it was in, but he
Good to
illustrated
great, yeah.
illustrated the Amazon flywheel, didn't he? And as you're talking, you can see how having a direct to consumer presence, some retail presence, kind of building the brand, creates sort of higher brand value as it relates to your corporate customers, which
Yeah.
then in turn drives discovery, feeding D2C and retail. I can see how that turns, but it does necessarily add some sales and marketing complexity and operational complexity into the business, doesn't it? But sometimes the right business model just finds you on its way, doesn't it?
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah, yeah. I was thinking
you
exactly the
you
same.
you have
Yeah.
to step into it, even though I love the entrepreneurial operating system. One of the key principles is simplify, 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 which I do absolutely believe. But what sometimes people misunderstand is you have to simplify to the limits of the right model for your organization, which may sometimes involve trading a little bit of complexity, right? Like, because you have to step into the actual opportunity in front of you, not the one that you idealized in your mind.
Yeah, and I think even you put them down on great presentation, pitch decks, and investor decks, and so on. And it sounds like that is the route. You also I think it's being agile is used a lot of time, but I think it's still having that, your initial thoughts about would work, go to market probably will work at some point, but maybe you also haven't opened the right door yet. And I think it's a lot about finding people, especially for a small, finding the right people that helps you on the way. So I think coming back to your original question about what I found hard, that it's hard to get to a point where you can sell a product that is legally compliant on scale. That's the first step. But then, at the same time getting your brand identity, and then you then have to go out and get people to buy at volume and sell that. But it's not like you're not hiring a sales force, because you're not Unilever in this connection with 10 salespeople that's going out just banging in every door. You have to be very, your founders with the time you have. So again, you need to, like, silver bullet, not cannonballs. And then you adjust as you miss the target, you adjust your things. And I think that's, again, you have to accept that complexity and uncertainty that you will live with, and difficult challenges that comes with more complex, as you say, sales processes, and different end consumer as well, you or users.
What do you miss, if anything, about conventional hospitality? Like now, from the vantage point of being the founder or co-founder of Paul's Kitchen, what do you miss about running a multi-site restaurant or cafe business? Like, in what ways are they different?
The lovely thing about hospitality is you get, instant feedback on your performance. And I think that's why lots of people love hospitality, did in hospitality for a long time. And it's funny enough, one of our ways of our sales techniques with the Postgres is all about taste. It's a taste drive sales. And we do out and do a lot of pop-ups. We've done with ISS, Sodexo, and we're in those situations. That's the founder strengths. We're playing on the founder strengths. And that's a bit like being back again, because you can read the room, you can read the person, you can be in service. There's no doubt about when every year since I haven't been in operation and Christmas hit, even how painful it was, I miss it. Like I was for lunch today with
Really?
one of my friends, and you miss that buzz of building up to that and have a successful period, because again, it's instant. Instant if this works or not. You can correct straight away. And I think a lot of hospitality forget sometimes to enjoy that. Actually, I know it's overwhelming sometimes and very hard, but also you definitely know if there's coming more customers in next week and the week before because you changed something. But what I'm doing now, we're working on some things we don't know the impact on. A new range, for example, that we don't know. We believe this is gonna revolutionize sales numbers, but imagine we launched that in Q1 and it doesn't. That
Yes.
feels like 9 months of work where you couldn't get any more feedback than consumer tests, which is consumer tests. It's not the market pulling. So I think it's that instant feedback, and then also the human element of you're surrounded with a lot of humans all the time, which you can impact positively, and that's really my thing. And you're a much smaller team in a supplier kind of world, and you are in a restaurant kind of setting. So yeah.
Oh my God, that's so interesting. I hadn't thought about that. Have you found that you've almost had a bias to want to scale prematurely because of your passion for kind of people and process, where right now it's about understanding product and market?
I'm also that's not my background. So it's been like learning on having we have a very good advisor, investor, ex Unilever marketing guy, like working a lot with Sean. That's been really really good. But like the whole positioning work becomes even more important than just do a really well defined restaurant concept. Because how many
Right.
restaurant doesn't open and actually become a success by because of the energy that first site had, and then they get the positioning right because they're adapting. Because now we got the site, we need to open in 3 months. The money's running, we need to get open. Where here you're actually doing a lot of positioning and strategy work, and you're testing assumption, which is a very different world. Which I think for both founders is a totally learning curve, but also principle we go from being we wouldn't call it operator, but like running teams and the ability to build teams and processes, you say very quickly, is not the super skill. The super skill is actually positioning and finding out the route to market,
And
which is it's in a restaurant is opening the door. That's the location, open the doors. That's the route to market. Very, very, very simple said, but
yeah. And have you ramped up anything prematurely yet? I mean, like one of my favorite topics is in B2B, at least in software, is ramping up a sales team too quickly when your product's not
oh yeah,
ready, your product's not ready
oh
yet. So
yeah,
like,
ramping up something. Yeah,
have
yeah,
you done,
yeah, yeah.
have you wasted some money?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. And time. Like, either where you thought you would hire something in freelance and this is gonna be the big thing, or negotiation on deals that suddenly just slips between your hands,
Yeah.
because you hadn't opened the champagne, but you definitely been thinking about which shop you're going down to, the bottle, and boom, something changes in their world. Um, and I think that I think this is entrepreneurs. At some point you're so hungry for that success that you forget actually it never comes like that. It comes
No.
1% every day, drip, 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 and then there will suddenly something happen, and you will not even see that's the thing. There's the swing wheel effect again. Wow, that was the thing. That was actually what's making or breaking this business. That was the thing. Um, I think that's been quite hard sometimes that you when you come from the hospitality world again, where there's you have this recognition straight away. Are the guests happy or not? Or and also everybody has an opinion about a product you sell, a food product you sell to consumers of end users, because of course the operators would sell whatever the end consumer wants. There's so
Right.
many opinions about food and taste, which in a restaurant setting, many times this is our menu, this is what we serve, and you don't have these discussion about, oh, there's a bit too much, tomato in, and there's all this, lots of complex feedback you need to take on. And at some point, you just have to say, this is our belief, this is how our product's going to be, take it or leave it. A bit like Apple. That's what I've learned as well. There's at some point as founder, you need to believe in the product, and instead of taking on feedback. So I think there's and then I think also we there was one really good learning where we ramped up. We sold a huge contract before we
Right.
had manufacturing really nailed down, and then that manufacturer pulled on us.
Oh no.
I'll never ever do that again, because I thought I have a pipeline of people I wanted to work with, but I didn't think about they maybe also there's an onboarding with them, and of course people know if you are not really moved yet, then you might be looking at something else. So you again assessed if you are the right partner for them, and then there was that delays. There was these 4 months of where you were just holding on because everybody was upset.
That's so stressful.
Yeah, so that's probably the best ramping up story. It just made me think that I know I went a bit around, but I think that's why that was not fun. And you forget about that, but that was this year, like where you thought, now we're ready, we go, let's just turn it on, and then you get the order, yeah, and then 2 days later you have to call them and say we have a little challenge, we can't produce for next month. We're sorry about that.
It's amazing, like the experience you get doing these different business models. Here's a question for you: given all of your consulting experience, the fact that you've had 280 something hospitality and related entrepreneurs onto your podcast, you've got a very, very wide network of successful entrepreneurial people, plus your own study and learning. Have you at any time had any kind of analysis paralysis on the way that you go about running this or any of your other businesses? Does that make sense? You almost sometimes feel like you know too much. You got this, like a lot of successful entrepreneurs almost fall into their first opportunity, figure a few things out as they go,
Yeah,
hopefully don't make any fatal mistakes that kill them, and then
yeah,
they just carry on. You get the survivor bias, right?
yeah, I
Do you
totally get
find
where
that? Do you
yeah.
overthink it sometimes?
I probably, because I have access sometime, if I should really hold my, I ask too much around, and then you get too many opinions coming back to consumer feedback again. And I think you actually, as a
That's
founder,
interesting.
because I was not, I did corporate food for many years in McDonald's, and so you're very used to take risk out of things. That's been a process over the years, and I think still is there. I see risk where my other founder would say it, and that's actually sometimes a good thing. He doesn't see risk, because I would say, oh, red flag, red flag. We need to navigate that. And actually, I think sometimes it's a bit, you say, if you don't know, you just go through it. You don't look for the problem. So there's no doubt about this, that, and also you've been a consultant. That's your job. Your job is to digest things out and put them together again and find all the risk you can find, and then help the client to mitigate that risk, or find the opportunity within that. It's not really to take risk. It's not the job you are hired for. It's to minimize risk and save money or time or make people better. I think you're right, and it's a really interesting question, and I think it comes up sometimes. And again, also, you everybody's on their own journey, and that's also what I've learned. And you can't just copy. It's great to interview you can get lots of good ideas, but you need to apply it and find your own rhythm around it. You need to build your own flywheel. I often say individual flywheel about life and how you approach things. But it is, and it's a very good question. But I think there's no doubt about it has an effect sometimes that I have too much, tried a couple of things, and I sometimes have to leave that and then just go with the gut, because the gut
Yeah.
always pull it. Funny enough, always in the right. I also believe in data, so I think it's a very good mixture of that. Um, but I is a couple of times also in the process where some of the people we have on have been very successful in corporate life, and they are investors, and then they come with their corporate view on, because that's what they know, and not because they're bad people. That's really valid argument. And then you spend too long procrastinating because you know, as the founder, you know what's right in principle to do. Instead of just going and doing it, you like mold it over and mold it over to you get to find out how we spent 3 months on this, and it was actually not correct what they said. But that's not because they didn't want to give the right advice, just because they've never been founders, and that's. But they're good at something else, and that's why you have them on board. So find out how you use your network. I think that's as well, and what you ask for sometimes, because sometimes you don't want to ask because you maybe get. John, well, our friend John Mason would say you should always ask, but that sometimes you don't want to ask because actually you know what's right, and if you ask, you just complicate things for yourself.
Yeah, it's so true. It's funny actually. I know that my experience of founding Yapster and then those 8 years has made me gun shy. Like I cannot bear the idea of 3, 4, 5 years in the product wilderness finding product market fit
No,
again. Like so a lot of that's really valuable. Like I'm obsessed with customer discovery and message market fit.
yeah,
You don't need to build a product and raise £1 million to check if people are going to buy your idea. Your web page that explains it and see if they click through is a good start. But sometimes there's a benefit to just diving in and figuring out once you're in the ocean, right?
yeah.
But like I can't bring myself to just dive in without knowing what's ahead of me now.
Yeah, but I think it's a change. I know you also become a dad. You become, and then I think
That's
also
right.
that actually have an impact on me as well. That you become, naturally. I think you, as a human, you become less risk averse because you suddenly have a very big purpose, and you also have a very big, responsibility to make sure that little one is taken care of, whatever that
Totally.
means: clothes,
Yeah.
food, roof over their head, and where in principle when you're on your own, as where I started as well, it doesn't really matter. You'll figure it out, or sleep on a couch, worst case. I think that changes also your entrepreneurial mindset. But I think we quite lucky with my business partner. We are like, talking about rocket fuel, the entrepreneurial system. That's rocket fuel. There's a dreamer and visionary, and then the integrator. There's a
Have you got that visionary integrator dynamic?
yeah,
Talk to me about your perspective on the entrepreneurial operating system, because it obviously is a simple system. It's what I love about it,
yeah,
but it's derived from a lot of more complex theories, which I know you're also expert in. So I'd be
yeah,
interested in sort
yeah.
of what your thoughts are on EOS.
So Gino Wickman, if he's still involved, was the founder of this, and he had this idea about there's all this great management theory, but how do you actually simplify it so you can use it in small business?
Right,
And that's why I fell in love with it, because it was also because he has a very much that people first thing. If you don't get the team right, forget about scaling, because that's really going to be the thing that breaks your business. But I think what he have you have behind you, you have the wheel behind you. I can see there's the vision, there's some data, and he talks about process and traction. And we're very much in the traction bit right now. We have the vision bit, but it's really the traction bit. What is the problem I fix? Yeah, and then you have your people. It's a very small team right now, so that people is always important, but it's more easy to manage. I know when we had 12 people, knock on wood, we do that. Then suddenly it becomes from a family of friends to. But I'm not really scared about that. It's really funny with other entrepreneurs. We'll come back to that in a second. They're really scared about growing the team. That's not really what I'm scared about. I'm really scared about
right.
the product market fit, because we don't get that. There's not going to be a team. Um, no, but so coming back to that, what I really like about it, the simplicity of it. Again, it's very practical, and there's all these tools you can go and use, and they sometimes look very simplified. But if you follow them, but you have to do them, and that's the thing. You need to put the work in these templates, and then incredible things
Yeah,
starts to happen. You get
yeah.
clarity, and you might use the tool a bit different. And it was actually in part of, we were starting writing investment decks a couple of years ago, and I came back to the rocket fuel, the integrator and the visionary, because we actually had to sell to investors why they should invest, and they're not investing in the idea early on; they're investing in the founders and believing,
True.
because any sensible investor knows what you come and present them is not how it's going to run out. It's going to something not totally different, but it might take a different twist in the pipelines you are presenting and numbers you're presenting. So it's very much talking about how we bring the two skills and we use the language from there. And it was very powerful. We still do that. And we always talk about that, especially if there's because the integrator and the visionary also clashes, because it's
Ain't
much
that the truth?
much about, I'm very much focusing on reality and what's happening right now. I can see into the future. It's not because I'm not visionary, but I don't dream all the time. I'm not oh, let's start this thing or let's do that thing, and no, let's finish what we have and flying the flywheel effect 1% every day. And people listen to the podcast will know that's the only thing I almost talk about all the time. But again, it's healthy because then we can't be all about process in a business, because it's also about where we're going and how do we challenge our perception of things, how do we do things differently. And if you can make that founder team work, as Wigman says, it's very, very powerful. But I think lots of I've seen as a consultant as well, lots of founders, they also set out with their business partners and don't check in on this early enough in the journey. And I think that book is absolutely brilliant because it gives you a language to talk about why you need this. And you maybe find out you don't have a visionary on the team. Maybe you need to get either an advisor or somebody in that can help with the visionary skills. Then it doesn't mean you need to hire them. And I think what's interesting with this is also not just a management book. It's actually they're actually doing this and they're taking it from their own business into the philosophy, writing book, and all these people that's involved in this is often ex-business owners, which again, it's people that has pain.
It's
If they've
so
been
true.
and have been successful or not, it's not the case. It's the pain they had. And I think often we think people have to be successful for advising. Actually, the people that's just by, there's some the founded businesses and just hit the golden stream and unicorn businesses, or very lucky get bought 3 years out and wow, I haven't had the pain, as you say. You have had a bit of a pain somewhere where you wouldn't like to go and have that experience again. And if you have, but you can probably advise very well on that pain. And I think often, you want to talk with people, also people that has done this similar type business as you.
Mm.
And I think a lot of us is in the small businesses. There's not many startups that actually become. We all wish we become big and great and mighty, but most actually become maybe medium-sized businesses, or maybe just small scale ups, and takes a very long time to get there. And I think also working with a system that fits with that instead of the typical management book, and I have some of them behind me, are really on big companies. And I think that's another really strong element with the system. And again, and it's so simple. Like the model you have there is like it's in the book. It's not
It,
even a
it,
simplified model. This is how it looks in the book.
it is, and it's right. Do you know what's really lovely? It's really nice that you've noticed that about the EOS implementer community. So I got certified with EOS Worldwide in the like this year. So we sold Yapster last year. I'm still working with Sona,
Yeah.
building the next generation of the product. But I got time outside of that. My passion's working with other founders, and I thought the entrepreneurial operating system changed my life, and so it's something I'm passionate about. But I wanted to do it properly, so I went and got
I didn't know that.
certified. Did you not know? Yeah, so
Ah,
I got certified, and so I'm one of like 30 professional implementers, and as some of them have higher designations to me, they're called certified implementers. They might have done like, I don't know, 1,000 sessions or something.
yeah.
And you're right, like they all come from business backgrounds, and it is like being in a little bit of a cult when you go and do the quarterly sessions, because we all are like raving evangelists for it, because it's set many of us free in some way
Yeah.
in our businesses. And most of us made a bit of money, but not the money that we dreamt of when we started, right? Like there aren't that many people that like flying on their private jet to the EOS quarterly implementer session, even though some of them are very successful, right? But like most of us talk about the pain. Yeah, it's interesting. And when you're sitting down with other entrepreneurs and visionaries that are in chaos and they just need a simple way to pull it all together.
Yeah.
It's so funny how nobody's interested in hearing about your successes. Like in my story, I literally say I founded this business called Yapster. For 5 out of the 8 years I ran it, it was a shit show. we raised a bunch of money, hired a bunch of people, won some great customers, and then I name a whole bunch of brands like Brewdog and Next and whoever, Cafe Nero. And I say, and then we were bought by a company backed by Google in 2022. But I can make it sound much better externally than it actually was internally and how it felt for most of the time, until a guy called Kenny Blair, who's the MD of a bar group in Scotland called Buzzworks, gave me a copy or recommended I get a copy of Traction. And it was like someone turned a light switch off. So like, I'm really glad that that's kind of come across to you, that like, whether you like the system or not, the people that are advocates for it, like it's very real to us, very real.
Yeah, and I think it's the internet is really really great, because actually that's one of the things I'm going to do in the future is exactly that. And I'm not maybe I'm maybe not going to consult on it or anything, but I think it's like it's a better version of a real MBA for most businesses, because that's actually
You would love it. We call it teaching as well, by the way, like rather than consulting, because we don't go in and run their business. We just teach them the entrepreneurial operating
yeah,
system
I love that.
until they don't need us, and then they just run it themselves.
Yeah, no, that's in principle also what you need is if you have to consult, it means that they're dependent on you, which I always have been very much against.
That's a good
I've
point.
had McKinsey coming and visiting me in corporate life, and you just think, oh my god, you never had pain, so why should I listen to you? You never opened a restaurant where there's full of water or mice or whatever. You never really understand. You don't understand, and then I'm not having a go at McKinsey, but it's just like I'd never really understood that, because that doesn't really change anything, because they don't do the transformation. They just give you the
Yes.
plan, and then you figure out what you do with that plan, that strategy. It's a beautiful strategy. It's what do you call it? You have the GC index, which I'm certified in, is like where you look at where you play on your strengths, and there's something in there called a game changer, a strategist, an implementer, a polisher, and a team player. And of course, you have a bit of all, but you're strong on two of them. And
Right.
normally, if McKinsey or Bain or whoever hires, they want strategists. What the strategist is, just come up with plans. They don't implement anything. So it's very
It,
interesting where I see the EOS framework very much as implementers, teachers as you call them, and team players. Like it's not about me just coming with a beautiful plan and then we're written on the blackboard and now go out. It's about teaching you how to run your business in a more simplified way.
it's so true. Are you still available for people that do need some practical help, or are you just totally fully like running at Pole's Kitchen, and you're happy to chat to people on LinkedIn and things, or
Yeah, I'm happy to chat with people, but actually, what I do now is like 100% focusing on Pole's Kitchen and then the podcast, which very well it's connected with what we do as well, and from an entrepreneurial point of view and commercial point of view, we sell to the industry, and therefore having the pulse on the industry and understand what's going on is quite critical. And I will also find it it's funny, as I think I kind of said to you before we record, it's become that thing a bit like you put your running shoes on and run X times a week. I need my podcast fixed, because it's my personal MBA, I often call it as well, where you learn a lot by listening, and often we are not very good at that, but in podcasting somehow, and you probably learn that you're forced to listen if you want to have a good conversation.
well, I mean, some of the conversations you've had on there are unbelievable, and it is interesting, the depth of insight that your listeners get into the industry and some of the people that you have on. It's quite an intimate experience, isn't it? Having someone like, um, is it Jeremy King, right?
Yeah, I had Jeremy King
He
recently. Yeah,
he is such an impressive
yeah,
guy. Quite imposing. Were you a little bit like
yeah.
nervous? Were you a little bit nervous?
I was starstruck. There was one of this, and I'm always nervous, because if you're not nervous, you don't care, I believe. So that's good. But I was really nervous, because that was like, when I started early on the podcast journey, because I didn't start out thinking this is going to be a weekly thing. I'll be totally honest. It's like a bit like I jump into it and it evolved and it became a thing.
Right.
And I think I've done that with most things. That we didn't start the Pulse Kitchen because saying, "Oh, we're going to do the Pulse Kitchen, then we're going to be feeding people pulses, and then it's going to go mental because some kind of trend in the market saying it." No, it's because it really comes from inside. But Jeremy, come back to Jeremy King. It was, it's like when you interview your heroes. And I've never met Jeremy King before I interview him, really. Only read interviews. And I couldn't find any really podcast or video interviews. I couldn't get an idea about how you do it. And then you also sit in front of this man that's gone through lots of pain. And
Oh
you
my
think,
gosh.
how the hell do we interview this man with respect as well? Because and he's back again in the game. He got literally thrown under the bus a couple of years, and now he's back. He don't need to, but he's back because he's like really care. And I thought, like, I was so honored that he wanted to come on the show, and he was recommended by another guest. And like that's also like you meet people you would never ever
Listen, I think
meet.
what you've done is amazing, and he in particular is so cool. Like I heard him talking once, and one of the things he said is he like had these very exclusive like restaurants, and he was talking about the price point. And of course, one of the things he's been famous for is having like really affordable soup and like these world class wines, but also very affordable sort of house wines or sort of lower wineless wines. And he's got this. I can't even do an impression of him because I'm so excitable and he's so dignified. But he was like, to have an interesting restaurant, you can't fill it full of private equity types. It has to be affordable to interesting people, or the wealthy people don't want to come. And it was so simple, but I thought my fucking head was going to explode because it was so insightful. It was
Yeah.
so cool, and you could just imagine like these like musicians and bohemians deliberately in his restaurant, and he built his menu so that they were curious and could afford it, so that he could sell a 500 quid bottle of wine to some boring private equity dude. And I was just like, man, you're my hero. And the fact that he's wanting to come into your community, and so many other great people have, I think, such a testament to who you are, your passion for the industry, which now straddles like supplier, operator, consultant. Yeah, you've done a lot for entrepreneurship in the industry, and I'm sure I wouldn't be, it'd be remiss of me not to thank you on behalf of all the people that listen but can't like talk back because podcast doesn't have a comment section. Michael, you very generously said people that have listened and found you interested are welcome to reach out with you on LinkedIn. You don't
Yeah.
consult anymore, but you're always happy for
Always
mad
happy to
founders with
chat.
ideas to say
Yeah.
hi.
Always happy to chat and always happy to help. And I believe you have to give to get. So I'm very much in that mindset. And you can always ask because that's really important to ask as well. And actually, being on the podcast talking about entrepreneurship, there's like an interview coming up with a guy called Wayne Baker who wrote this book. You should always ask, and the power of asking questions, which is John Mason, we know, our shared friend from Sideways. He got me onto him, and I hunted him down on LinkedIn. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs will learn a lot of that, but of course we need to ask sometimes for help when we need help, because I think entrepreneur journey is a very hard journey, and there's many areas we need help on, and we are not superhumans. We are just human. So it's about surrounding you with the five most important people all the time, and the ability to ask them for help. And I also ask your investors for help. I had this conversation recently, Rob. I think it's perfect time. And I was like puzzled over this, a fellow entrepreneur that didn't want to ask his investors for help. They don't just, if they just invested with money, then definitely the wrong investors if you can't ask their great minds about help.
Yeah, you just can't be proud, can't you? So you heard it here, folks. Heard it here first, folks. One of the most connected men in hospitality. Happy for you to ping him on LinkedIn and shamelessly pump him for wisdom. Michael, thank you so much for doing this. It's been amazing.
Thank you, Rob.